This is the Chassidic Story Project with Barak Hullman, podcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. This podcast is sponsored by listeners just like you. To become a supporter of this podcast, please go to HasidicStory.com, HASIDIC story.com. You'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know, you'll never know. When he was a young man, the holy Rebbe, the Maggid of Zlochov, Rabbi Yechiel Michal, would sit all day learning in the Beit Midrash. One day, there was a local wagon driver who was also a religious Jew, and one time he went out on a trip to take some Jews to some place or another, and even though he had planned his trip back to make it in time well before Shabbos, he made a wrong turn, and before he knew it, it was getting later and later. He was watching the sunset as he was getting closer, racing into town. But by the time he had arrived in town, there were stars in the sky, and Shabbos had begun. The simple wagon driver was truly broken by this, because he had never desecrated the Shabbos in his entire life. And for sure he didn't do it intentionally. He didn't know what to do when he was driving. He didn't think that he could just leave his horse and wagon by the side of the road. So he continued driving and ended up driving on Shabbos. He couldn't sleep. He was so brokenhearted. He didn't know what to do. So he went to the rabbi of Zlochov, and he poured out his feelings and his pain from breaking Shabbos. He said to the rabbi, "Rabbi, please, you've got to help me do tshuva. I can't believe that I broke Shabbos. I really didn't mean to. And now what do I do? How do I make up for this?" So the rabbi could see that the wagon driver was sincere. He didn't do this intentionally, not by any means. And so he decided to give the wagon driver the most lenient form of tshuva. And he told him to bring a pound of candles to the shul erev Shabbos. And when he did, and the candles were lit for Shabbos, then his tshuva would be accepted. Now Rabbi Yechiel Michal, who as I said before was a young man at the time and not yet a Rebbe, but of course he was a tzaddik and was sitting all day learning the Beit Midrash. When he heard the rabbi's ruling, he was very upset, because he said, "What kind of tshuva is this for somebody who breaks Shabbos? Bring a pound of candles to shul. Mamish chutzpah." But he kept quiet. And that Friday afternoon, the wagon driver brought his pound of candles. He put them on the table in the back of the shul. And just before Shabbos started, the door burst open, and a dog came running in and ate all the candles. The wagon driver, not having any place to buy candles before Shabbos at that point, was completely broken. First he was upset that he had broken Shabbos and now he had his tshuva, and here he brings the candles, and a dog comes in and eats them? He didn't know what to do with himself. He went to the rabbi and he said, "Rabbi, obviously my tshuva wasn't accepted by Hashem. I mean, who's ever seen a dog running into shul eating candles? What do I do now?" The rabbi said, "Don't worry, my friend. It's okay. Bring another pound of candles, erev Shabbos, and everything will be okay." So the next erev Shabbos, the wagon driver, he brings the candles, but this time he's not going to let a dog eat them. So before Shabbos started, he lit all the candles. And he sat there in shul, watching the candles with his own eyes. And he didn't realize how quickly the candles were going to burn. And they actually burned out before Shabbos started. He couldn't believe it. All of them had burned out before Shabbos started. So once again, he was completely broken. And he came to the rabbi and he said, "Rabbi, my tshuva wasn't accepted. I lit the candles. There was no dog, but they burned out before Shabbos started." So the rabbi said, "Don't worry. I promise you next erev Shabbos, the candles will burn all the way into Shabbos." And so the wagon driver came, and this time he didn't come as early. He came really right before Shabbos. He puts down the candles. He lights the candles. And just when Shabbos started, one of the windows in the shul burst open, and a huge gust of wind came and blew out all of his candles. Oh, this poor wagon driver. He didn't know what to do. He goes back to the rabbi and he says, "Rabbi, obviously this isn't the right tshuva, because My candles are not burning. First the dog, then they burn on their own too early. Then the wind comes and blows them out. This isn't a coincidence. And the rabbi agreed. And he said, listen, at this point, you need to go to the Heilige Baal Shem Tov in Mezhibuz and ask him for a tshuva. So being a wagon driver, he got in his wagon. And even though Mezhibuz was many hours away, he drove to Mezhibuz, went to the Baal Shem Tov, and told him the whole story. The Baal Shem Tov listening, he said, the tshuva that the rabbi gave you is the right tshuva for you. I promise you, bring another pound of candles to shul this Friday, and when you light them, I guarantee that they'll burn. The wagon driver, of course, was very happy, and he runs to leave, but the Baal Shem Tov said, wait a minute. There's a young man who sits and learns in the Beit Midrash there, Rabbi Chil Michel. I want you to bring a letter to him from me. And so the Baal Shem Tov sits and pens a letter, seals it in the envelope, and gives it to the wagon driver, and he said, deliver this, and I promise you, your candles will burn the Shabbos, and your tshuva will be accepted. So the wagon driver gets back, he goes to the Beit Midrash, he hands the letter to Rabbi Chil Michel, who when he sees that it's from the Baal Shem Tov, he gets very excited. He opens up the letter, and inside, it's the Baal Shem Tov inviting Rabbi Chil Michel to spend Shabbos with him in Mezhibuz. Nothing could make Yechiel Michel happier than to be by his Rebbe for Shabbos. And a personal invitation like this, it's never happened before. So he knew, even though the Baal Shem Tov was just a few hours away, he was going to leave on Wednesday to make sure to get there on time. And he leaves Wednesday afternoon, and even though it should have just taken him a few hours, it got dark very quickly. He had to spend the night in an inn. The next morning, he gets up early, davens, gets in his wagon, starts driving towards Mezhibuz, but somehow he got lost. He'd driven this many times, he couldn't believe that he got lost. And all day Thursday he was lost. He gets up early Friday morning, and he can't seem to find the way to Mezhibuz. No matter how many times he asks and gets directions and goes the right way, he ends up going the wrong way, until finally he sees the road to Mezhibuz. But he sees also that the sun is setting, and he can't believe it. He left on Wednesday, and the sun is setting, and he starts hitting the horse. Faster! I have to get there before Shabbos! And he arrives in Mezhibuz seconds before Shabbos starts. Puts the horse quickly in the stable, grabs his bag, and runs into the Baal Shem Tov's house. The Baal Shem Tov was just putting out his pipe that he always smoked just before Shabbos. And he looks up at Rabbi Chil Michel. Now back in Zlotchov, the wagon driver had lit his candles. They were burning brightly. Shabbos began, and they burned all the way through the Friday night davening, just like the Baal Shem Tov had promised. The Baal Shem Tov, in the meantime, looks over at Rabbi Chil Michel and he says, I'm guessing that you're pretty happy that you made it here on time. And Rabbi Chil Michel understood that something was going on. He said, Rebbe, I don't understand. I left on Wednesday. The Baal Shem Tov said, you should know, Rabbi Chil Michel, I saved you from Chilul Shabbos. I saved you from desecrating the Shabbos. And if it weren't for me, you would have been a Mechalel Shabbos. And so now you learned a lesson, my friend, that when a Jew is forced to desecrate Shabbos, and it's not intentional by any means whatsoever, and that Jew is brokenhearted over breaking their Shabbos, then you now understand that a pound of candles is quite enough for a person to do tshuva over that transgression. Nein, nein,